Today is April 2nd, the year 2007, and I'm interviewing Mr. Russ Dunman here in Montgomery, Alabama. His birthday is December 28, 1946. Mr. Russ served in the Vietnam War. He was in the U.S. Army, and he was in Detachment B-53 of the 5th Special Forces Group. People attending are Mr. Russ and myself, Stevie Sport, and I'm working with Trinity Presbyterian School. All right, Mr. Russ, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Fayetteville, Tennessee.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I have 2 brothers, younger brothers, and 2 older sisters.
Okay. Where did you go to school?
I went to school in Tennessee until I was in the 9th grade, and I moved to Montgomery. And I went to Cloverdale Junior High School in Montgomery, and then Lanier High School here, and then went to Vanderbilt University.
Okay. What did you do before you entered the service?
As little as possible. I was a student. I didn't do much of anything. I had summer jobs, but I didn't do anything as a career.
Where were you living before the service?
I was living in Montgomery.
Okay. Do you have any family members that were in the military?
I have a brother who was in the Air Force National Guard, Air National Guard, here in Alabama. And of course my dad served in World War II.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted into the war?
I enlisted
Okay.
in the U.S. Army.
Was there anyone or anything that influenced you to enlist?
Yes, I was about to get out of school and about to be drafted. And rather than be drafted, I chose to join so that I could have some choice about what I wanted to do.
Okay. Which branch did you serve in?
Served in the U.S. Army.
Okay. Why did you choose that branch?
It was the easiest, and my dad had served in the Army, and they had openings that would take me at that point in time. During the Vietnam era, getting into the Army was not a problem, so I just joined the Army and went with that route.
What was your training like?
It was good training. It was intense. It was different. It was very disciplined, which was something that I think all young people need when they get in the Army. It put everybody on an equal basis. Nobody was better or worse than anyone else. We all got treated just alike.
Can you tell me about your first few days or weeks in the service, like what your thoughts or feelings were?
The first few days particularly were a mixture of excitement about the possibility of the adventure and at the same time the fear of where it was leading because of Vietnam. We all knew at some point we would probably be in Vietnam. But I think the biggest thing, no matter what anyone says, was the feeling of all of a sudden being alone, away from family. You couldn't just pick up and go home if you wanted to. You were there. You were committed.
Okay. Where did you serve?
I served my first few months at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and from there to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then to the Republic of Vietnam.
Okay. What was your rank or your highest rank?
My highest rank in the active duty was captain.
Okay. What exactly was your job assignment?
Once I was trained, my duty was classified as a strategic reconnaissance, working with the Special Forces Group in Vietnam.
Now, what exactly is that job? Can you elaborate on that?
Our job was to take intelligence that we learned about enemy activity and go and verify that information to see whether there were troops in a certain area or whether there were supplies coming down a certain trail, or whether we could catch a prisoner maybe to gather intelligence about what enemy activity was going on. So our job was to gather intelligence information about enemy troops and enemy movement in Vietnam.
Did you experience any combat firsthand or witness any?
Yes, a little bit of both. In our base camp we had some what were called night probes. Some enemy activity would try to overrun or would attack the camp. And then on 1 or 2 occasions where we would be out looking to gather intelligence, we would be either in the wrong place at the wrong time, or we would walk upon an enemy troop or troops and we would engage them and then try to get away as quickly as possible.
Okay. What are some of your most memorable experiences? They can be funny, fearful, anything.
I think the fun part would be the people that I met, and I think we had a good time doing what we were doing when we were not in the field, if you will. There were a lot of good times with that. Now, fearful, every day you were in Vietnam, you were a little bit afraid because the possibility existed that something could happen, that you could be hurt or you could be killed, you could lose friends, you could, there were just a lot of things. So you lived with fear to keep the edge on, I think, more than anything else.
Are there many casualties in your unit?
No, we were very fortunate to be a unit that was, when you're gathering intelligence, your primary objective is not to be discovered. You don't go looking for a fight. So while we did have some casualties from time to time when there would be activity, most of our guys were very lucky. We did not have as many casualties as some of the traditional or mainline units did.
Were you ever wounded?
No, I was never seriously wounded. I have, the wounds I have were from shrapnel, from a rocket grenade. A rocket went off one time and I had a place on my arm and a place in my mouth where a piece of shrapnel hit me, but I was never seriously wounded.
Okay. What thoughts ran through your mind when you did receive those shrapnel wounds?
When was it going to stop? Hopefully it would be over soon, that would be the worst that would happen. And I think that's the biggest thing, was how to protect ourselves and how to protect myself and get out of that trouble.
Okay. What was life like in the service?
Life in the service was very disciplined. It was very for me as a single person, it was sort of carefree. We enjoyed life, we had a good time, but we were very serious about our work. We were serious about the activities that we had and carried out. So I think the good part was we learned how to be responsible people while we were in the service.
What about your food and provisions? Were those decent?
Food was great in most cases. Now we all dealt with what were called C rations in those days. They were military rations. They were cans of meat and cans of beans and cans of potatoes, and we ate a lot of those things, but it was tolerable. And in the rear areas where we were in Vietnam, we had hot meals pretty regularly. The military had made sure of that. Now, some of the troops in mainline units or the line units lived in base camps where they were not as regular with hot meals, but they had the C rations to live with. They got old, but they were very nutritious, and if you look back, they weren't all that bad.
What did y'all do for recreation to pass the time?
We made up our own games. We played in base camps in the rear areas. We would play softball or volleyball in the camp. The difference was we played by what we call then jungle rules. In other words, everything went. When we played volleyball, you could tackle people under the net, and you could punch people. Playing softball, you didn't want to slide. You just ran over and hit somebody if you didn't like what they did. There was a lot of cards. We played a lot of poker and things like that. So we just kind of made our own fun.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends?
In those days, we didn't have that. This would have been 35 years ago, a little more. The best way to communicate was simply by writing a letter. During my time in Vietnam, cassette tapes became the big thing. And I bought a little tape recorder, which now would be huge by standards. And I have some tapes that I sent back and forth with my mother and daddy. I was not married then. And we sent tapes back and forth with messages and what we were doing. But that was very limited. So most of our communication was through the mail or very rarely a telephone call we could make.
How did you celebrate holidays, or were you over there during any major holidays?
Yeah, you tried, if you were in a rear area, the commanders tried their best to let us celebrate. Typically, if it were Christmas or Thanksgiving, we would have turkey and dressing if we were lucky enough to be in the area. if you were in a fire base or somewhere out in the bush and you were lucky enough to have a bit of downtime, or there wasn't any enemy activity that was taking precedence, you could enjoy a little slack time, if you will, take a little time off. But in almost all cases, you were always on alert, because the enemy at times used our holidays as a time to catch us unaware. So we had to be on guard, if you will, all the time.
Are there certain skills or lessons that you learned?
Yeah, I learned how to make decisions. I learned how to be, I think leadership skills were the main thing I learned. How to, I guess the best way to see it is treat people like you want to be treated. But at the same time, if you're the one that is in charge, listen, learn, take all the facts, put them in a package, and then make a decision about what course of action to take. Whether it be in a military situation or now in the business world, that's what it taught me to do. It gave me a sense of, not a sense of, but it matured me in a lot of ways that I'm not sure I would have ever grown to had I not been in that experience. The biggest part was some decisions we made were actually life and death. If we had made the wrong call or been in the wrong place or taken our troops in the wrong position, it could have meant someone getting hurt or worse, someone killed. So you wanted to be careful, but you couldn't delay. You had to make decisions quickly but accurately. I think that's the biggest thing I learned.
Do you recall the day that you left the service?
Very well.
What were your thoughts or feelings?
My thoughts were, why me? I had enjoyed what I had done in the service, not all the parts of it, but I enjoyed the military life. And I had intended and had planned and had thought I would make the military a career. But at the time I got out of the service and Vietnam was phasing down, they had a reduction in force, and unfortunately I was caught in that, and I was actually sent home from Vietnam and out of the service at the same time. So it was a little bit of a downtime for me. I wanted to be in, and they didn't want me in. So that was my reaction at that point in time.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was sitting in my office in Montgomery, Alabama, the day that the last troops came off of the top of the American embassy in Saigon in 1975, and watched some of it on TV, what little we could see in those days with film reports, and kind of a sad day.
What did you do in the days or weeks after you left the service?
Kind of caught up with myself. I partied a lot. I traveled some, and then my daddy told me I had to go to work and to make some money. So I tried a little business for myself, and then I went into the restaurant business and was in that for about a year. And then I went into the banking world about 2 years after, a year and a half after I got out of the military.
Did you make any close friendships while you were overseas?
I would say a lot of good friendships, and probably a half a dozen very close friendships that I maintain to this day. There are 4 or 5 of us who actually started in basic training together and went through every step of our military career together at some point, including Vietnam, although we were in different units there. So we maintained a very close friendship, and we talk several times a year and try to get together about every 2 years if that's possible.
That's neat. What was your career after the war?
My career for the last 34 years has been in commercial banking. I've worked for a bank for the last 34 years, excuse me.
Did your wartime career contribute to that choice?
Not at all. It was just the luck of the draw that I met some folks who worked at a bank. I liked what it looked like they did. They had good banker's hours, as they call them, which really aren't real, but they act like it was. And it was just something that I thought would be another job until I could find what I wanted to do. But once I got into banking, I enjoyed it, and I've stayed there ever since.
Okay. Do you think differently now about war than when you first entered the service?
I think differently, not so much than when I got in the service, but I think I realize now what the difference, if war's a terrible thing. I don't think there's any reason, I hate to think that men have to fight one another to solve their problems, but it's a reality. It's part of the way this world is. But I think the big difference in the wars that we now fight is, including Vietnam, they're very political. The military doesn't get a chance to do what needs to be done. They're driven by the politicians. And while you put men in harm's way, you don't let them do everything that's possible. Excuse me, men and women. I don't mean men in the sense of a man. We put our troops in harm's way and don't give them all the tools, or let them use all the tools that are available for them to use to complete the victory, if that's what we're there for. And I think the current situation in Iraq and the Vietnam War, the Korean War, if you go back that far, were exactly that situation. And you see that now in Korea, where we've never had a peace. It's an armistice, it's a temporary truce. And 60 years later, we're still trying to figure out who's in charge of the Korean Peninsula.
Is there any advice that you would give to young people today who want to join in the military, or maybe who are already in the military?
I would say two things. I think the military is a great place for young people to take advantage of the opportunity to find themselves if they're not sure what they want to do. It helped me to mature and grow up, if you will, learn what life is about, and figure out how to be a good citizen, how to make decisions and be a leader. I also think it's a great opportunity to serve. If there's anything I could say is, be sure you know what you're getting into. It's not fun and games. It's a real world situation, and it's a tough place to be. But I think it would be a great opportunity.
Is there anything that you would go back and change if you could in all of your experiences?
I don't think so. I think there are always things that I would do differently, I think, in hindsight, but that would be trying to evaluate things that I can't do anything about. I'm very satisfied with what I did in the military, in the sense that I think I gave it the best I could and served as well as possible. And I think that I wouldn't pick out any instant that I would change at all as to what I did.
If you could have spoken with the political leaders of your day during Vietnam, what would you say to them?
I think I'd say the same thing. I'm not sure what I would have said then, because we were all young and not sure what we were doing, and Vietnam was kind of a new situation. But today, I think if I could go back and know what I know today, what I would say to a politician that were here today is, if you're going to put this country in a warlike situation, or if you're going to put our young people in harm's way where they're going to get hurt, then let them run the war. Don't run it for them. And that's what happened in Vietnam. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, that's what I think is happening in Iraq today. We are so intent on being politically correct that we forget people get killed when a politician is a little reluctant or says we need to be hesitant. He puts another American life in danger instead of letting them do what they need to do.
Now, did you earn any awards or medals?
I did. I have the one, I guess the one I'm most proud of would be the Bronze Star that I earned in Vietnam. But I think the biggest award I got was just being able to serve with the men in my case that I did serve with in Vietnam.
Do you mind telling us how you got the Bronze Star?
It was a Bronze Star for service. That was it's for doing the job well and doing it right all the time. The Bronze Star can be earned a lot of different ways. One is for valor if you do some heroic action. Another is in my case, doing it as you just do your job well every day and earn that award.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, what does this say?
This is the beach at Vung Tau, South Vietnam. This is a rest and recreation area in South Vietnam. And this is American soldiers and Vietnamese soldiers here. Further up the beach, way up in this corner, there was a big barbed wire fence, huge. And on the other side of that barbed wire were the soldiers from North Vietnam and other places that came to the beach, and we just left each other alone while we were resting and recreating. So you can see how busy that beach was there. So.
Y'all just all men.
All
doing
men,
your
yeah,
job.
that's right, that's right.
Okay.
Have you got that turned off? Here's our you can see the big American in the middle of the bottom picture with my two interpreters. The gentleman on my left over here was my primary interpreter. His name was Nia.
Yes.
And the little man on the left is his brother. I don't remember his name. And then the ones in the picture are my interpreter and his father in the dark blue clothes. And the guy on the far right of the picture, or on the left of the picture standing, is my other interpreter. He was the junior interpreter that I had. And this is their family. They invited me to their home on more than one occasion, and I'd go and eat with them and spend a weekend with them in Saigon. So
That's neat.
now he.
All right, so this is your interpreter's artwork.
This is my interpreter's artwork. This was Mr. Nia. You can see his signature here. I don't know who the subject is. It was just a pretty pen and ink picture, and I told him one day how nice it was, and he gave it to me. And then he did this same sort of an oriental flavored picture. Again, I don't know that there are subjects that are, it's just he does a beautiful job freehand, all of his work. So.
So this is what your mother had you take
Right.
before Vietnam.
This was what my mother wanted, was a picture of me in a uniform that I took before I left for Vietnam. So that's what that picture is. I was a second lieutenant in that picture.
That's cool.
Identify, and these coins are of the 3 different Special Forces units I served with, but don't drop them. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Let me see if I can get them in the right order here. I was in the 7th Special Forces Group
Okay.
at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I was in the 20th Special Forces Group in Vietnam. And I was with, the 5th Special Forces Group in Vietnam. And the 20th Special Forces Group here in the United States in the National Guard. So, and these are just coins that we use. You can take them with you when you meet with your buddies, and if you don't have your coin, you may wind up buying drinks for everybody. So. And one of the things I was very proud, my mother was proud of, and I always speak of my mother, when I graduated from basic training.
Zoom in on that.
Let me get them around here. They gave, in basic training at each class, each group that graduated, a battalion-size unit, which would be about 300 guys, I think. They gave what they call the American Spirit Honor Award, which was for the top trainee of the group. And I earned that award in basic training and got this and a nice trophy to go with it. So
Look at that side.
it's just a pretty little award.
Okay.
Dog tags.
Dog tags.
These are the first and only dog tags I was ever officially issued. And that little thing there is, some people may not know, is what we call a P38. It's a can opener. That's what we opened our rations with. And every GI around kept a P38 on their dog tag chain so they could open their rations when the time came. So.
Okay.
And this little piece of paper is, I was an airborne. In other words, I jumped out of airplanes. This was my award of the Vietnamese jump wings that you'll see on my uniform on the other side here in just a minute.
The jump wings?
Jump wings.
Okay.
I was a certified Vietnamese paratrooper.
That's cool.
All right. Let me get around here.
Okay.
The award of the Bronze Star is the one I'm most proud of, I think, and it was mailed to me because before the award was approved, I had come home, so they put it in the mail to me, and I received it at home in the mail.
Interesting.
Set of what we call jungle fatigues from Vietnam. They let us bring home one set, and I had one brand new set that I used for dress-up occasions that I had left when I came home, and I've just kept it. I can't wear it anymore. It's way too small. But everything, we had seamstresses come in and help us with the nice uniform, and everything was embroidered on the uniform.
U.S. Army?
Even the name on the back pocket of the pants.
Where's that? Right there?
Right here.
Dunman. Okay.
So while this looks like a fancy uniform, it never got really worn.
Okay.
We didn't have anything nearly this nice to wear every day.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the jungle boots I brought home from Vietnam. This was the last pair of jungle boots I had when I was in Vietnam. Somewhere along the line I put some polish on them, and I don't know why, but when I came home they were almost pure white. We never polished our boots.
Mm-hmm.
So these are, the soles are just about gone, and they're one I've been in a bag stuck in my closet. So. And this is my dress uniform. Again, I can't wear it.
Mm-hmm.
Way too small. But you can see the
Zoom in on that.
rank here with captain on it.
Mm-hmm.
The Special Forces emblem,
Mm-hmm.
which is important. This is the unit, Special Forces unit tab with Airborne and Special Forces on it.
Mm-hmm.
My branch of service was the infantry, so I have crossed rifles.
Mm-hmm.
The CIB, which is the Combat Infantry Badge, that's for being engaged in combat with an enemy force. And then the ribbons that I have displayed with the Bronze Star, the Good Conduct Medal and my Vietnamese service ribbon.
Mm-hmm.
My jump wings for being paratrooper. And then on the other side are the Vietnamese jump wings I showed you the citation for a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And 2-unit citations that were awarded to the 5th Special Forces Group
Mm-hmm.
when I was with that unit. And these are the Green Berets I wore. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was in the 7th Special Forces Group.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the one I wore very infrequently in Vietnam, but it is a 5th Special Forces unit,
Mm-hmm.
Green Beret. So.
And those are your boots?
And that's my boot. That's the dress boots. They're leather with fancy cap toes, and they were kept at the shine you could shave in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's left of them. They've been in a bag for years. I haven't seen them until tonight for many years. So.
Okay. All right, Mr. Russ, can you tell me about your jumping out of airplanes and your wings that you received? And just any experiences?
I think the best way to tell you about jumping out of an airplane is the question I get asked every day when someone asks me is, why in the world would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? When I was 22 years old and joined the Army and single, and it looked like fun, so that's why I started doing it. And when I got out of the military, I had about 813 jumps out of airplanes, including some free fall. I did some halo, military free fall jumping. I think the experience of jumping out of an airplane is one of a kind. I'm glad I did it, but I never want to do it again. Never ever want to do it again. The unit I was in Special Forces required that you jump out of airplanes. That was one of the requirements they had, that you be parachute qualified.
Mm-hmm.
But they also did other things as well. So parachuting, while it was a big part of what we did, and we trained a lot with parachutes, both free fall and static line, we also did other things with special operations. I have some pictures somewhere where we would come out on what we called on a rope. They would come in to get us, and we would couldn't get a helicopter landed to pick us up, so they would drop ropes down through the trees or into the ground, and we would hook ourselves to the rope, and they would lift us up, and we would fly away just hanging on a rope under a helicopter.
Oh, wow.
I think one of the most harrowing experiences I had, and you asked a few moments ago, was we went one time to begin a mission, and the only way we could get on the ground was to take a helicopter, and we rolled big aluminum ladders off the side, and we would climb down the ladders. And on this particular occasion, we thought we were going into an area where there would not be any enemy soldiers, a cold area, and we were going to do some reconnaissance. But we got to our area. There were 6 of us going down the ladder. 4 men got on the ground, and the last 2 of us started down the ladder. And the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, had waited for that point, and when we started down, they shot the helicopter down, and we had to jump to the ground from about 40, 45 feet up. And that resulted in pretty beat up guys, 2 of us. and the helicopter crew was hurt. The pilot was killed, and the co-pilot was injured. The door gunner was injured, the guys on the ground kind of protected us as long as they could. And when we got on the ground and could get moving, we gathered up the wounded and the dead, and we took off and ran for a couple of days trying to get away. And our guys in other helicopters kept the enemy away from us long enough until we could get out. So I think that's the time that I felt as close to being a dead man as I've ever felt.
And that was your Bronze Star,
that
right?
was, part of that was involved in that, that's right. It was very much a scary time, and it took six or eight guys working together and nobody giving up, and having some great support from other guys who weren't going to let us get hurt anymore if they could do anything about it, protecting us in helicopters until we could get picked up and carried out to safety. So that experience was probably the worst of my experiences.
Tell me about your waiting to be picked up. Did you have to run and hide, or
We
what did you have to do?
We would run and hide and try to keep as quiet as we could. You couldn't keep very quiet with 6 big old American guys running through the jungle, but we tried our best. But while we were running, we would, our friendly guys, our allies, our buddies in the helicopters would watch for us, and they would see where the enemy were, and they would attack them with helicopters, with gunfire and that sort of thing. Because there was no place for them to land to pick us up. We were in pretty deep jungle or pretty bad terrain. And at the end of the second day, they had enough time to get us to an open area, and we were able to be surrounded with helicopters, and they landed one and picked us all up and flew us out to safety while the other helicopters flew around us and kept the bad guys away from us.
Did you ever come or have any close encounters while you were hiding from the Vietnamese?
On occasion, we would be in a little hole watching a trail or watching a village, and maybe we'd be too close to the trail and we'd realize too late that we were there, and we'd have to lie very still while the NBA or the VC would walk very close to us within 3 or 4 feet in some occasions, where we would just be at the wrong place and we'd have to hide while they came by.
You said y'all were in holes, or?
We were in holes. We'd dig little ground holes and cover ourselves with leaves and underbrush and that sort of thing to get out of sight as quickly as we could. And then as soon as it was safe, after dark, or if it rained, when things were raining and the noise of the rain was there, we would leave the area just as quickly as we could.
Okay, that's interesting. And what about that poster you told me about one time before?
Oh yeah, there were posters on, especially for the Green Beret soldiers, who were, I think now we can say that they were very much feared. The Green Beret soldiers were very feared. They were, because they did so much good for the Vietnamese people, and they were so aggressive in fighting the war, that there were posters. They were like wanted posters out of the Old West. They would take a picture of one of us and put it on a poster and offer a reward for someone. In some cases, up to $10,000 if you brought the Green Beret with the head under it. You could get a big reward. So that's why we didn't wear the Green Beret very often, the actual beret in the field. It was used for ceremonial purposes.
Did y'all have helmets or anything that y'all
wore? We mostly wore soft hats, kind of what we call boonie hats. They were big, broad-brimmed hats. We weren't required to wear helmets like some of the units were, so we kind of were more comfortable without the helmet.
When you're jumping out of your airplanes, did y'all go at certain times, like day or night, or how high would y'all sometimes jump?
We would go either day or night. Most of the jumps that we did practicing in Vietnam were daytime jumps, because we would be practicing formations or how to land and what to do once we got on the ground. But most of the operational jumps that we did in Vietnam were after dark, really early in the morning, 2 in the morning, something like that. So it would be very dark, and we would be way away from everything. The Air Force would fly us in from anywhere from 12 to 15,000 up to 30,000 feet, and we would jump into the area where we were going to be operating in at night, early in the morning.
What was that like, jumping from that high and at night?
Scary, mildly put. You had to have a lot of faith in the air crew that you were flying with to do all the calculations, because you obviously couldn't see the ground. They would just tell you when to go, and you would step off the back of the big airplane and fall and land where you were supposed to be or close to it. It was a frightening experience in thinking back, with 6 or 7 guys at one time. So,
How did you know when to pull your chute?
all of us had altimeters to tell us how high we were. They were mounted on the top of our reserve chute in those days. And we would open our chutes at a predetermined altitude, 1,500 feet or 3,000 feet, whatever we wanted to do. We'd decide how we wanted to get to the ground. So we just watched that. We very seldom used an automatic opener, because if it malfunctioned at a high altitude, for example, it could put you in a lot of danger. You could be lost forever if it opened. So most of the parachutes we jumped were manually opened.
Jumping from that height, do you feel anything? Do you have any feeling in your stomach? Or?
Yeah, you have a real strange feeling in the pit of your stomach. It's not, I can't describe it. There's just no description for what it feels like. You have no sensation of falling except for the feel of the air rushing by your face. Because at that altitude you can't see the ground, so you can't sense that you're getting closer to the ground. And particularly at night, you can't see the ground. You only see a big black hole that you're jumping into. So you depend on your buddies, and you depend on your altimeter and your equipment to do its job, and then hope for the best when the parachute opens. A daytime jump is scary because you can see the ground, and you know that if your parachute doesn't open, it's going to be a long ride to the ground.
Did that ever happen to anybody?
Yes, it happens. I have witnessed one total malfunction while I was in Vietnam, and a very unfortunate incident. We're not sure why the guy didn't open his parachute, but he never opened it and fell from about 10,000 feet right to the ground. He never opened his parachute. And that's the only one I ever witnessed.
Now, did that kill him, or did he
did.
just have... Okay.
Instantly.
Instantly.
He may have died of a heart attack before he ever hit the ground. We don't know. In those days, there wasn't much way to find out. There was an investigation, but the impact to the ground was
Pretty bad.
pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Do you feel like you're flying almost?
If you're not careful, I was always too scared, but I've been told, and I can see how it could happen, that if you're not careful, if you're jumping from a pretty good altitude above, say, 10,000 feet, you can become euphoric. You can feel that you're flying. You can feel that you're doing things. And if you're not careful, you'll wait too long to open your parachute. So there's a real sensation that you have to be careful of, and not get too confident about what you're doing. You have to always be a little edgy about it and be sure you're doing it right.
Okay. Is there any other experiences or just anything?
Now, I think the overall experience of and I've said this already in the interview, I think the biggest part of the experience of being in the military and of Vietnam is what happens afterward and how you react to it. And I know some of my buddies that were there have had difficulty getting over it. I feel very fortunate that I did not have that difficulty. I know why they did. I can see exactly why they feel that way and why they have the reaction they do. And I wish there was something that could be done to help them more than is being done to help them now. But to have a very supportive family, I was lucky to grow up where I grew up, and I never had to face coming home the resistance to the war that the Vietnam War in particular, that so many of my friends did. And consequently they hid from it. And I think once you hide from it, it kind of gets inside you and you can't get rid of it. So I feel very fortunate to be able to talk a little bit about it and not have a stress syndrome left over from Vietnam so much.
When you first got back, just at night, did you ever have any nightmares, or were there any instances?
I think so. For several years I would sometimes be caught in a situation that something would startle me or scare me, and I would react kind of funny. When I first got married, I'd been home about 3 years before I got married, but I remember my new wife, still my wife, 33 years later, woke me up in the middle of the night one night for some reason, I don't know what now, and I almost took her head off because it startled me, and I just reached over and threw her away from me, and it scared her to death. To this day, she won't wake me up in the middle of the night anymore without punching me from a long way away. So yeah, there were times after I came home. That's been a long time though. I haven't had any real bad situations with that in a number of years. So.
Anything else?
Stevie, thank you. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's a picture of a Cobra helicopter just hovering off the ground about to take off. And this picture is of the workhorse helicopter in Vietnam. This is a Huey. This is what did most of the flying of troops and everything. I mentioned hanging on a rope under a helicopter. You see the little specks in the air? The helicopter you can't see in that picture, but we were hanging from about a 50-foot rope under a helicopter.
Wow.
And this is what a terrified I looked like. I was hanging under there and took a picture of myself, turned the camera around and took a picture of myself.
And that was from the one where you're hanging?
From the one where I was hanging in this other picture. This is a picture out, I was sitting in the door of a helicopter about to jump out, and it's just looking back at the countryside. And then again, now you can see men hanging under the helicopter. There's the helicopter with 3 guys hanging underneath. Parachuting. You can see the parachute in the top left-hand corner of the picture. Another picture of a parachute. You see a parachute here with a soldier underneath, and here's the soldier here coming down under his parachute. And this is our base camp over here, and we were practice jumping this.
Where was your base camp located?
It was about 30 miles 30 miles east of Saigon.
Okay.
And this is a bunch of jumpers that we were jumping that particular day, and you can see all these were practice jumps we were making with the Vietnamese that day.
Okay.